Welcome to my channel. My name is Meiko. In today's video, I will explain Volume 1 of the manga FULLMETAL Alchemist, but before I do, I would like to suggest that you watch my previous video if you have not already done so. I will put a link to it in the description below. In the previous video, I talked about what I want to do in my channel. In short, I would like to explain my favorite manga from my Japanese point of view, focusing mainly on 1. Things that cannot be understood without a background in Japanese culture and Japanese common sense. 2. The expression techniques unique to the Japanese language. And 3. Proverbs, idioms, and other expressions that may become confusing if translated directly. These things I will explain are not always necessary to enjoy Japanese manga. However, you may enjoy them even more if you know that, and also that may help those who are trying to read the Japanese version. And since I want to learn from you about things like the examples of amazing manga translations and other things that only a non-Japanese can notice, I will just offer what I can offer first. I will try to explain things as objectively as possible, but they will still be subjective no matter how hard I try, and I am not an expert, and even though I check to make sure there are no mistakes, I am far from perfect, so please listen for fun and do not take it too seriously. Also, for copyright reasons, I do not use manga panels in my videos, so it would be easier to understand if you had either a physical or a digital copy of the manga at hand while watching. Please be prepared. As said, I would explain about Volume 1, but the manga FULLMETAL Alchemist is published in 2 editions in Japan. The normal edition with 27 volumes and the complete edition with 16 volumes. And the volume 1 I am talking about is the one of the 27 volumes edition. I'm not sure what editions sell well in other countries, but for my videos, I'll use the one I'm familiar with. Let me start with the titles for each chapter. I just translated the Japanese titles directly using a translator, so the titles in English or other languages may be slightly different. It would be great if you could let me know in the comments what the titles actually are in English or other languages. And as I mentioned in the previous video, almost all the chapter titles in Japanese have no in them, which comes from the title of the manga, Hagane no Renkinjutsu. That's not a big deal, but it is maybe fun to know. Okay, let me get started. 第1話、二人の錬金術師。二人 means two people, so I think in English it would be chapter 1, the two alchemists. That's a very literal translation though. Next, 第2話、命の代価。I think this could also be translated directly as chapter 2, the price of life, because inochi means life and daika means price. Next, 第3話、炭鉱の町。I think coal mining is probably the right word for 炭鉱. I would like to add a few things about machi. In Japanese, these two kanji are sometimes used for the same machi sound in alternate ways with somewhat different nuances. Although in English I think they are both town, so the translation of the chapter title could be Chapter 3, the coal mining town or something like that. To explain in more detail, this machi is a section of land designated by the government and used for address in a phrase such as blah 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 machi. It is smaller than city, which is also used for address, but larger than mura, village. On the other hand, The kanji this machi used here in the chapter titles refers to a place where people come and go and bustle about. This is my personal opinion, but for example, even if there are no more people in the area due to like depopulation, the blah 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 machi area itself will remain. But if there are no people living there, it can no longer be called machi with this kanji. I think the kanji machi used here is the one that gives a stronger sense of the presence of people's lives. Next. 第4話、車上の戦い。The word 車上 is written as on the car, but it is not only used to refer to cars, although it is not as broad as the English word vehicle. Personally, the only things that come to mind when I think of the word 車上 are cars, trains, and buses. But there doesn't seem to be a word in English that reminds me of the same thing as 車上, so it would be more limited and titled Chapter 4, Battle on the Train. Now let me explain what I found interesting in the manga itself. Let's start with Chapter 1. On the page immediately after the cover art, there is what looks like an information board below a radio playing a religious program. The sign below the post sign is written like this. The signboards in FULLMETAL Alchemist are written in English, even in the Japanese version, because its setting is probably early 20th century European style. Of course, if it is European style, it could be written in other languages like German instead of English, but most Japanese cannot read it. I think Arakawa-sensei thought about the balance between word building and easy reading. But the sign that perhaps reads Kaminari, I don't think it's in English. If it is an English word, I'm sorry, but I think it is the Japanese word kaminari. Kaminari is thunder. Nowadays, kaminari is generally written with this kanji, but it was originally written with this kanji. Kami means God and nari means sounding. It was believed that God made thunder. So I think this is a nice little joke to put on the first page of the episode that is about to focus on religion. Numbers written under Kaminari also have a little things that probably only Japanese can understand. In Japanese, 5 is go and 6 is roku. So when it is written 5656, the Japanese can also read it as goro-goro. The word goro-goro is often used as an onomatopoeic word to describe the sound of thunder in Japanese. It is used like this. I hear goro-goro outside. Is it thunder? That's why I thought the word on the board, kaminari, could be the Japanese word kaminari. I will try to explain such little things as I notice them. Next, the page jumps around a bit. Ed and Al went to church and had a conversation with Rosie. Is Rosie's name still Rosie in English, or do you read it as Rose or something? Anyway, I mean a woman who has lost her lover and clings to the little religion. In order to explain what I found curious about this scene, I have to explain from some Japanese background, which might be a bit boring, but please listen to it. First of all, as I talked about a little bit in the previous video, there are 3 types of characters in Japanese language: kanji, hiragana, and katakana. Kanji was originally introduced from China, while hiragana and katakana are uniquely Japanese characters created based on kanji. Hiragana and katakana, which are mainly used in modern Japan, have 46 letters. The relationship between hiragana and katakana is somewhat like the relationship between lowercase and uppercase letters in the alphabet. For the single sound a, there is a in hiragana and a in katakana. Generally, Japanese children learn hiragana and katakana around the age of 6. The hard part is kanji. There are more than 2,000 kanji that are taught in Japanese compulsory education. Many of them have multiple readings, so the amount of what you have to memorize is enormous. Of course, it is impossible to remember 2,000 different kanji all at once, so in textbooks, children's literature, and manga for boys and girls, most kanji are written with hiragana or katakana in some cases to make them easier to read. Thanks to this, when children encounter kanji they don't know, at least they know how to read it. This is also convenient for beginners learning Japanese, so some people learn Japanese through shonen or shoujo manga, but you should be careful because sometimes manga has a different reading from the common way of reading kanji. Now, going back to the point, the scene of the conversation with Rose in the church is literally where this different reading from the common reading appears. After Ed talks about faith and science using the components of the human body as an example, Ed compares himself to a certain myth based on his experience. Before I go any further, I would say that this myth is most likely the story of Icarus in Greek mythology. Sometimes different but similar myths exist in different cultures, but as far as I know, this is not the case here. The story of Icarus is quite well known in Japan, and I knew about it before I read FULLMETAL Alchemist. In Ed's dialogue, when he talks about Icarus, there is this kanji that is usually read as Taiyo, meaning the sun. But here it is given with the kana, kami-sama, meaning God, for reading. In my opinion, when a kanji is read in a different way from the common way, most of the time kanji expresses the meaning of what is said and the kana expresses the way to read it. In other words, in this case, they are trying to make it read kami-sama, God, while giving the meaning of Taiyo, sun. Although I think the meaning of kami-sama is also somewhat important, and it is not just the way of reading, because the story contrasts religion and science, and it is talking about how he was punished by losing rooms as a result of his arrogant act of getting too close to God by engaging in human transmutation. Perhaps Arakawa sensei used the kanji for Taiyo because it is easier for the Japanese to recall the story of Icarus. I would love to hear how this is written in English or other languages. I am very curious to know if they use sun and God side by side, combine the two words like sun god, or just take either sun or God. So please let me know if you could. The next thing I will explain is again a little page jump, where a man tells Father Cornello that Ed and Al have asked to meet with him. When the father hears the names of the Elric brothers, he realizes that the state alchemist has come. He then describes their visit, which, if I tried to translate directly from Japanese, would go something like, the military dog seems to have a very good nose. It could be the same in other languages, but in Japanese, dog is used to describe a person who is loyal to an organization, an authority, or in some cases, a specific individual. Well, Ed is not really a royal person, but the state alchemist is considered to be loyal to the military, so to get back to the point, the word dog does not have a very good meaning here. The Japanese word for dog is inu, which actually has three kanji. The three kanji for inu are inu, inu, and inu. It is complicated, I know. First of all, the kanji for inu on the left is the most commonly used kanji. It is used to express the animal dog in general. It is also used for pet dogs. Next, leaving aside the middle one for a moment, look at the right kanji inu. This kanji is only used in a very limited situations, and it doesn't refer to an actual dog, but to the dog of the 12 Chinese zodiac signs. The 12 signs of the Chinese zodiac are used to represent the calendar, time, and directions, and 12 animals are assigned to them for easy memorization. The dog is one of them. In Japan today, the 12 signs of the Chinese zodiac are no longer used to indicate time or directions, but most people are familiar with the animals of this year's zodiac and those of their birth year. So it can be said that the 12 signs of the Chinese zodiac are still in use as a calendar. The kanji inu I skipped earlier is the exact kanji used in military dog, as the father Conero said about Ed. This inu originally had a similar meaning to the inu which I explained first and was mainly used to describe small types of dogs and puppies among the dog. But since this inu also means wild kind of thing, small dogs and puppies are now usually written as the left inu as well. The thing is, the expression military dog appears in another part of this volume, but the kanji used there is the left inu. So I will consider the reason for using two different kanji later. Let me move on to a scene where Ed and Al confront Father Conero directly. I will explain three cases in a row from this scene that is given a different reading to the kanji than the common reading, as I mentioned earlier. The first is in a sequence of lines which Father Cornell tries to take in Rose again, who has heard the truth about the miracle hidden in Al's armor. The literal translation of the Japanese line is, "You should be on this side," but from what he meant, this side could also be translated as our side. Here, the kanji that would normally be read as kyodan, meaning religious organization, is read as kochira, this. I think the kanji expresses the subject more clearly for the reader, but when considered as a composition, it is more natural to use the word this, that, here, there, etc. So that is what was used for the reading. The technique of expressing the subject in kanji and creating a compositional naturalness in the reading is often used in FULLMETAL Alchemist, but I don't feel that it has much purpose beyond making it easier for the readers to understand. So I won't explain every one of these cases where kanji is read in a different way from the common way. The selection will be based on my personal choices, but please understand that there will be too many if I pick all of them. The second and the third are both cases where the meaning of the borrowed word is given in kanji and the reading is given in katakana. I'm not sure how Chimera chimera is pronounced in the original language, but in Japan it is pronounced chimera. So I will go with that. In Japan, chimera is almost certainly familiar to fantasy fans, but there may be quite a few people who do not immediately get it. Thanks to the kanji goseiju, a combination of the words synthesis and beast, even people who don't know chimera can get the feel of it. Another word, oatmeal, is also difficult for Japanese to imagine by just hearing the sound. It is easier to understand when it is expressed by the kanji of kikai, machine, and yoroi, armor. Personally, I find it quite interesting which kanji are used in such cases, so I would like to introduce maybe not all, but some of them as they appear. Here is the last of chapter 1. Ed's line on the last page of chapter 1 in Japanese is 降りてこいよ土産流。格の違いってやつを見せてやる。And if translated almost directly into English, come down third rate. I'll show you the difference in level between you and me. And I'm very curious to know how this line is actually translated. Because, spoiler alert, this video is for people who have read the entire manga, so if you haven't read it, which is fine if you have watched the entire anime, skip ahead a dozen seconds or so, okay? Actually, there is a line in the last part of the manga that reminds the reader of this line. So it doesn't have to be a direct translation, but it is ideal to put it in such a way that the two lines are related so that when the reader reads the line in the last part of the story, he or she will remember it as, oh, that's line in the first episode. If it works like that, it can be said the translator did a great job. I would like to add a few things about dosanryu, translated into English as third rate in Ed's line. First of all, do is a prefix to emphasize the word, but this doesn't mean that you can put it at the beginning of any word. It is often added, for example, to words that have a negative meaning or are a little dirty. The do emphasizes the word and makes it sound more informal or offensive. It also has a mocking tone. That's why we don't often add do to words or plays such as kawaii, cute, to say do kawaii. By the way, if you want to emphasize such a nice word, cho is recommended. Like do, it gives a slightly love impression, so it is not suitable for formal use, but cho is often used in everyday conversation or when sharing thoughts on a manga or anime. Cho is very useful because it can be used for both good and bad words such as 超かわいい, super cute, or 超まずい, super bad taste. Back to the topic. There are no clear rules for words to which do can be added, so it is difficult to explain. We just use it by feeling. I would also like to add a little more about sanryu. The word sanryu seems to be directly translated into English as third rate, but there may be some gaps in the meaning, so I will explain a little more. If we take ordinary as our standard, ichiryu, first rate, is naturally above it. If you want to express that something is special and far beyond ordinary, you can say 超一流 with 超 I mentioned earlier. The positioning of niryu second rate is a bit difficult, and after looking into it a bit, I found explanation with different interpretation, set up slightly less than first rate but good, and just ordinary. Although my personal impression is that niru is mostly used to mean below average these days. I doubt that there are many Japanese who would consider you are niru to be a compliment. So I would say that it is not a little below ichiru. Words do change. And since niru is almost below average, of course sanryu is below average. We usually use ichiryu, niryu, and sanryu in Japanese, adding do to say dosanryu as Ed did this time, expresses that far below average. Those were the explanations for chapter 1. Let me start my explanations of chapter 2 here. Knowing that Ed had committed human transmutation, the photo corner mocked Ed. In response, Ed replied, "Shut up, you can't do anything without a stone." I don't know how it's actually translated, but it's something like that. In this line in Japanese, the word dosanpin is used like うっせんだよ。石がなきゃ何もできねえドサンピンが。Dosanpin is a word to abuse the other person, and if it is translated into such a word, it is okay. But I had always misunderstood the origin of this word, and it was not until I made this video that I looked it up and learned its true origin. So I will explain it as a lesson to myself as well. First of all, the do at the beginning is for emphasis, as is dosanryu I just explained. As for the word sanpin, I am ashamed, but first I will tell you how I misunderstood it. Somehow I knew that this word sanpin meant to make fun of the other person. It is a bit loud and also a bit old-fashioned. Maybe I had heard it in a Japanese historical drama series like the one set in the Edo period or something. But I didn't know the kanji because I only heard it from the sound, and it is written in katakana in this chapter of FULLMETAL Alchemist. So I assumed that if it was written in kanji, it would be like this, because I thought it was short for sankyuhin, which means third level product, and that it was something. This is a mistake I made and wrong information, Please do not memorize it. It seems that sankyuhin itself is not a common word, but there is ikkyuhin, a word similar to ichiru first rate that I explained earlier. And sankyuhin is used to refer to something much lower in rank than normal. So I had assumed that sanpin came from that. But when I looked it up for this video, I found the kanji was wrong in the first place. To my surprise, it is written like this and reads sanpin. By the way, this kanji means the number 1 and is the simplest of all Japanese kanji, but it is also one of the kanji that has many readings. So good luck to those who study Japanese. Anyway, another kanji, maybe you can guess, means the number 3. So the kanji sanpin is 3 and 1. The reason this has a nuance of making fun of others is because the yearly payment of the lowest ranking samurai in the Edo period was sanryo ichininbuchi. Ryo is a unit of gold coins, and the whole part of the word means that A samurai received free gold coins and enough rice to live on for one person for 1 year. I'm not sure how much that would be in modern terms, but it must have been the minimum at that time. The word "sampin" was used to insult such low-ranking samurai and has remained as a word of abuse for the other person. To be honest, I think it is rarely used in everyday life. It is a bit old-fashioned and not a very elegant word. Well, basically, it speaks letter love. So if you want to imitate the tone, I definitely recommend copying Al's tone. How is it in your country? The next scene I will explain jumps to the end of chapter 2. When Gluttony asked if he could eat the Father Cornello, Lust replied that he should not eat a fourth-rate bastard. As I mentioned in my explanation of chapter 1, since we usually divide by ichiru first-rate, niru second-rate, and sanryu third-rate in Japanese, yonryu fourth-rate is quite an insult. I didn't have much to explain about chapter 2, so that's all I have to say. If you have any questions, such as what's the Japanese word for here, please feel free to ask me in the comments. I will then move on to explaining chapter 3. The first scene I'm going to explain is when Ed is hit with "It looks like wood" by the boy Kyle as soon as he arrives in the mining town. When Kyle realizes that Ed and Al are from out of town, he immediately asks a lot of questions. Sightseeing? Where from? Do you have a place to stay? Then he tells his father that they have guests and he shouts, "Kyaku, guests, kanezuru." The word kanezuru is directly translated as money vine, which is a Japanese word for someone who gives you money easily. Now, tourists tend to use a lot of money, so there might be people in the tourism industry who actually see tourists as kanezuru, but of course it is quite rude to say it in front of the guest. The English phrase "money vine" doesn't seem to have the same meaning as the Japanese kanezuru, so I guess Kyle's line here is translated as saying something else that is a bit rude. Then the next page, Kyle's father works in the coal mines and runs a pub and inn, which he describes in Japanese as "nisoku no waraji." A waraji is an old-fashioned shoe made of straw, and nisoku means 2 pairs. It is difficult to wear 2 pairs of waraji at the same time, so people sometimes say "nisoku no waraji" when they are working at different jobs at the same time. I found it interesting that when I looked up how to translate "nisoku no waraji" into English, there was an idiom "wearing 2 hats." And I learned that in English people use hat to express the similar thing. Although the translation may have taken on a completely different expression, how would you describe having 2 jobs in your own language? Next, let me jump around a bit to the scene where Kyle's father chases Ed out of the pub. This is where the phrase "military dog" that I talked about in my explanation of chapter 1 comes up again. When Father Cornello called Ed "gun no inu," a military dog, the middle kanji inu was used. In contrast, when Kyle's father calls Ed "gun no inu," the left kanji inu is used. Of course, I can only guess at the intention behind this use of different kanji, being only a reader, But I thought it might be to distinguish between someone who plans to do evil and the good civilian. If there is some kind of slang expression for dog in other languages, it would be interesting to translate Further Comello's line using that expression and the word in here using a word like ordinary dog. If the translation reflected this nuance, you can say that it is very detailed. I believe that the phrase military dog will appear in future volumes, so I will pay some attention to the kanji used when I read those volumes. On the next page, after the phrase military dog appears, people talk about how much they dislike military people. They also complain about their low salaries, which is expressed in the Japanese idiom Suzume no Namida. Sparrow's Tears is a literal translation of Suzume no Namida. And just in case, sparrow, Suzume, is a small brown bird that is very familiar to Japanese people and even appears in folk tales. Since it is the tear of a small sparrow, it is used when referring to something that is extremely small in amount. When I looked up similar idioms in English, I found drop in the bucket or chicken feed. It is interesting to see the difference in expression. In your language, how would you say something that is extremely small in amount? The next thing I will explain is when Al brings food to Ed, who has been thrown out, and they talk. They are shaking with fear as they remember their master in their conversation. This master is Shisho in Japanese and is written like this, which is read differently here. It is read sensei. Sensei is usually written with these kanji. The word sensei is often translated as teacher, and what most Japanese people immediately think of when they hear the word sensei is teacher. Although the Japanese word sensei is not only used for teachers, but also for various professions such as doctors, lawyers, politicians, and as I'm calling Arakawa sensei, mangaka is also one of them. And it is also used to refer to one's master, just like someone sensei. But if you write sensei and make it read sensei, the reader may misunderstand that it is about a school teacher, so I think that is why it is written shisho and made to read sensei to avoid that. I guess it doesn't matter if it's written shisho and read as shisho, but maybe it's a personal feeling. I feel completely comfortable with Ed calling shisho because of his character, but I feel more comfortable with Al calling sensei. It's hard to explain, but for a typical shonen manga main character, I mean a hot-blooded character, calling someone shisho suits them, but for other characters, it seems a bit out of place. Even if there is a master-apprentice relationship in real life, for example, when you introduce to someone, you might say, "This is my shisho." But I think in Japan today, it is very rare to call your master shisho face to face. So for a character who is kind of calm, it might seem more natural to call their master sensei rather than shisho. The last thing I will explain for chapter 3 is the one where Ed offers Yoki to buy the right of the coal mine with gold. Fake gold, of course. Yoki falls right into Ed's trap and they talk to each other with goofy smiles on their faces. 錬金術師殿もなかなかの悪ですの。いやいや、注意度のほどでは。If translated directly into English, it would be, Alchemist Dono is pretty sly yourself. No, not as you, returned Dono. Non-Japanese or even young Japanese would not get it, but it's kind of stock phrase used in Japanese historical dramas. In Japanese historical dramas, especially the old ones, the story often goes like this. The merchant gives bribery to the local governor, the one in power in the area, and asks for a favor. Then the governor says, お主も悪よの. You're pretty sly yourself. To which the merchant replies, いえいえ、お代官様ほどでは. No, not as you, sir. Generally, both will be defeated by a hero in the end. So the conversation between Yoki and Ed is basically this, and because it is from Japanese historical drama, Ed is holding a Japanese fan, and they call each other with Dono, which I intentionally read as it was in the earlier translation. Dono is one of the respect titles, and while you may have heard of Japanese respect titles such as someone-chan, someone-san, and someone-sama, Dono is almost never used to call someone in everyday conversation in modern Japan. It is not that it's not used, but mostly only in written form. I would be surprised if someone called me Meiko Dono directly. So calling someone by their name with Dono gives a somewhat traditional vibe, but I have no idea how to express the same vibe in other languages, and actually the traditional vibe itself is not the big deal here, but it is probably just a way to remind of the stock phrase of Japanese historical drama for Japanese readers, so it is difficult to translate. Those were my explanations for chapter 3. Here comes the last chapter of volume 1, chapter 4. In this episode, a group of extremists hijack the train the general is traveling on. The name of this group is Ao no Dan. Ao means blue, but Dan is a word used in the relatively broad meaning of a group of people, so I'm not sure how it is translated. Anyway, the part that caught my attention was the scene where the leader of the group fired shots from inside the train at Ed, who was on top of the train. In this scene, he describes the presence of someone on the train as there is a nezumi. Nezumi can mean either rat or mouse in English, but in Japanese they are both called nezumi. The reason he said that is because in Japan, we often use nezumi, rat or mouse to liken intruders. I'm not sure if other countries also use rat or mouse to liken intruders. What do you think? Is it possible that some languages use different animals? Also, if rat or mouse is used in English, which one is used here? I'm very curious. Later, after retaking the engine room, Ed went back up on the train, and one of the criminal group was waiting for him, and here we see Nezumi again, but in a slightly different way than before. He says, Hatsuka Nezumi-chan. I'm not sure why a specific type of mouse, Hatsuka Nezumi, is used here, but looking it up, it seems that Hatsuka Nezumi is a small type of house mouse, so perhaps mouse is closer to what is expressed in Japanese than rat in this case. Because he finally faced Ed and knowing that Ed is only a child, he probably used Hatsuka Nezumi to emphasize Ed's smallness. And chan is often used as a friendly term of endearment, but since chan is basically used in a relationship of equals or from a superior to subordinate, It sometimes adds a slightly mocking nuance. Most of the time, it's a friendly term of endearment, so don't worry. Although when a bad guy smacks and adds tongue, there are quite a few cases where this kind of nuance is added. The last thing I will explain is when the train arrives at the station and Colonel Mustangs show up and talk to Ed. When the colonel says that he has heard rumors about Ed, Ed replies, "You have 地獄耳 as usual." The literal translation of 地獄耳 is hell for 地獄 and ears for 耳. But the literal translation probably doesn't convey the meaning, so I hope it's translated well. 地獄耳 means a person who is quick to hear rumors and a person who never forgets what they have heard. I think it means the first meaning here. Actually, I didn't know the second meaning. When I looked it up, it seems that the second meaning came first and the first one came later. But nowadays, I think it is more often used to mean a person who is quick to hear rumors. There are various theories as to why the word 地獄耳 has such meanings, and I will try to give a brief explanation without going into details. But in Japanese Buddhism, it is said that in hell, one's actions during life will be judged by Emma Daio, Great King Emma. It is said that Emma Daio sees and hears everything a person does and records it all, which is where the word 地獄耳 comes from. I do think there are many such words in Japanese that are strongly influenced by cultural and religious things, and other languages definitely have them too. So just knowing a lot of words would not be enough to translate them. Translation work requires a really broad knowledge, so I deeply respect translators. Those were the explanations of Volume 1, Chapter 1 to 4 of the manga FULLMETAL Alchemist. How were they? As for me, I felt it was difficult to find the right balance. There were some parts that I felt I went into too much detail, while there were others that I simplified too much. Maybe from the next video I will make the explanations of each volume like this or a little more compact. I don't know if I've met your expectations, but I hope that even just one thing in the video leaves a certain impression on you. I would be very happy if you could give me your feedback comments. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them as well. And what I am explaining is only what I was wondering how it would be translated. So I would be very happy if you could tell me the answer. This is how it is translated in my language. In this video, I am particularly interested in some cases where special kana are assigned to kanji, such as Taiyo, sun is read as kami-sama, god, or shisho, master, is read as sensei, teacher, and I'm very curious about how they are expressed in other languages. The next video will cover and explain a specific topic as announced in the previous video. Specifically, it would be about Ed, Al, and Winley. Many of the names of the characters in FULLMETAL Alchemist are probably English names, so there's not much I can do to explain them, and I would rather wish someone would tell me. But I would like to explain things like first person. As you may know, there are many words for I in Japanese, such as watashi, ore, boku, and so on. And the impression of the character changes depending on what kind of first person is used. So if that sounds interesting to you, please come watch the next video. Thank you for watching so far. I hope to see you in the next video. Bye!